there's a couple of epiphanies. And when I thought about this, and one is, I think, probably true for most people. And for me, it was really quite a big epiphany. I had a fairly dysfunctional upbringing in terms of parents splitting up, being in foster care, and the usual stuff that turns you into a singer-songwriter, really. And I think with that came a lot of anger and a lot of resentment and a lot of bitterness, because I think it's hard for anybody, especially if you're young, to understand why two adults, i.e. in my case my parents, would not be taking care of me, but rather be doing whatever they want to do with their life. So certainly as I got older, I realised I harboured a great deal of resentment, and it affected relationships, and arguably still does. I'm not known for my commitment enthusiasm. And but after, it comes a certain point in time where you just don't want to be angry with the world, I guess, or it takes its toll. So a friend of mine suggested that I went on this course, and I have to confess, and probably Epiphany, this website, is not the place to say that I'm English, we don't do therapy. We don't go out and over dinner with some stranger say, who's your therapist? It just doesn't happen in England. But I did decide to go on this, it was a pretty hard time in my life. The contract with my record label had finished, and I was sort of lost, and my identity was sort of so wrapped up in that, and I didn't really know where I was going. So it's kind of like hitting my own sort of emotional rock bottom, and along with that, the end of a relationship as well. And a friend of mine said, well, you should go on this course. So I did. And I was down in the wine country, and basically you go, it's very rustic, and they make you give in your phone and anything else that might connect you with the outside world. And you have to address what your feelings, I guess, your anger and your fears. To be honest, first few days they had people holding babies, i.e. plastic dolls, and naming them. I felt that this was rather stupid, and I laughed, and which didn't go down too well, and they nearly threw me off the course. But over a period of time, one of the activities they had you doing for 7 days was you had to write letters to the significant people in your life. So here I am, my big thing obviously is abandonment and commitment. So they were like, well, okay, write a letter as if you're your mother, explaining to you, inner child, okay, I'm with it now, but at the time it just seemed weird, explaining to that person, that 8-year-old, who you are. I mean, why did you leave? What was the motivations? And I'd never done that before. It was always so much about my perspective. How could she have done that? What the hell? What a bad person she was. And it's interesting. So that evening, I went home, and sorry, not home, but back into the areas where we were, and had to write an essay as my mother, my real mother, and explain to me as an 8-year-old why I was leaving. What is it that was going on in my life at that point that meant I couldn't be here? I couldn't be here for me, so to speak. And I had to do that for my father. I had to write the same essay for my mother, and had to do double dippings because I was also in foster care, and I had to also write a letter as if I was my foster parents. I suddenly remembered my mother had issues of her own that she was struggling with, and maybe she couldn't cope with having a child. The truth was, it was in the beginning of the 70s, and she was white, my father was black. And through writing all of those things, the epiphany, I guess, that I had, it was something that someone said during the course. And they said, somebody can be guilty but not to blame. And I know it sounds really easy, but I'd spent so many years being angry, and then it just clicked into place. I realised that they're never going to be perfect, and yeah, my life may not have been brilliant growing up, but I don't think that they deliberately went out. That wasn't their intention. I went home and I asked my father, why on earth would you put me to live with a white family who don't really like black people? And his answer was that he felt that putting me with a white family would give me a better start in life. Now, I would never have thought to ask that question if I hadn't have been left with that one simple phrase: you can be guilty but not to blame. Yes, as I said, my life was what it was, but it wasn't because somebody went out their way to do that. And I never asked my mother, because I've only met her once, and that was before then. But, you know, I'm sure my mother thought it was for the best too, to probably go and deal with her own issues and not, you know, get in the way of a child's life. So my epiphany is, and I carry it with me now, even when I get really angry with people and irritated, that for the most part, and I'm sure there are exceptions, whatever happens, people can be guilty, but they're not, so they can be to blame. You can phrase it either way you want. They can be to blame, but not necessarily guilty, or they can be guilty and not to blame. In other words, very seldom do people do things with a deliberate intent to be nasty, evil, or to have long-term effects that are, you know, hurtful. So that would be my big epiphany, really. That, you know, you got to let go. Doesn't mean you forget, but you let go and help me. I don't. It hasn't changed the past, but I'm not angry about it anymore. My other big epiphany was as I said, I'm a singer-songwriter, which unfortunately I did have a relatively successful career once, and it will happen again. But you know, I was signed with a record company who treated me incredibly well, but you know, things happen, and I was dropped, and you know, it was everybody else's fault, really. I thought I couldn't possibly be to blame, for I am nothing short of an angel, a seraph, in fact, of the highest order. So after, wallowing, really, for a lengthy period of time. Admittedly, I do suffer from depression, which I'm very open about, but some of it was depression, some of it was just wallowing, self-pity. And I was out with some friends, and you know, when you're with a bunch of girls, the thing that generally happens is you talk about men and life lessons, and you know, why we keep repeating behaviour, and someone said, you know, at the table, I know you know, I keep going out with the same guy, or I keep doing this, and we all kind of looked at her, and I think it was sort of like this community realization of, yeah, honey, but the one common factor is you. You know, you don't have to do it, but you keep choosing. These are the choices you keep making. So it kind of made me laugh. And on the way home, I suddenly had, this sort of thought of, oh, you know, and I realized that a lot of these scenarios that I found myself in were of my own making, really, instead of just letting things go. And I think if we look at life in general, and we find ourselves in the same situation again and again and again, usually there is one common theme, one common denominator. And if the common denominator is you, sadly, the other 100 people can't all be wrong. I think with that realization came the fact that it was time for me to do a new album and to enjoy it. And hopefully, as I said, now hopefully I'm a common factor in things that are a little bit more relaxed and not so temperamental.